Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, I'm Audley Stevenson, and this is the Audacious Living Podcast, hands down the most audacious podcast on the web, and welcome. Glad you could be here. It's always a pleasure to share with you as we continue our goal of helping you live your best audacious life ever. Our social medias, as always, is a great way to stay connected to us. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I almost forgot YouTube. You can like, follow, subscribe, share, click the notification button on our YouTube channel, and you'll be alerted every time new videos come out. Today's podcast, we're going to focus a bit on the topic of doubt, but specifically touch on the opportunity that a little bit of doubt can create for us. Now, I'm going to get some help because today's guest is Marc Pitman, who's perfect for the topic because he's done a ton of great work as an executive coach for leaders and teaches them his approaches around embracing doubt in those uncomfortable moments of uncertainty and truly treating them as gifts. He's also authored the book, The Surprising Gift of Doubt, Use Uncertainty to Become the Exceptional Leader You're Meant to Be. So he's got this topic well covered, and it definitely is a great conversation. Now, self-doubt is very common, and it's something that we all have to deal with once in a while. It's not unique to a specific set of individuals. We all experience it, whether you're a celebrity, successful business owner, or multimillionaire, or a high-performance athlete. You've questioned yourself at one point in time. So it's understandable that if you feel that way, you're not alone. Self-doubt is completely normal, and it's actually a healthy thing. The real question is, what do you do with it when you experience it? Do you let it hold you back and you don't take any action and freeze? Or do you use it as a chance to sort of self-analyze yourself and get better? The choice really is ours to make. The dialogue I had with Marc around this is great, and I think listeners will really walk away with an understanding, or at least a fresh understanding, if you hadn't had it already, of really how you can embrace doubt. And I think you'll find a true appreciation in some of the things that Marc had to say. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Marc Pitman. Enjoy. In his latest book, The Surprising Gift of Doubt, leadership coach and author Marc Pitman teaches leaders to embrace doubt and the feelings that come with it, as well as the idea that they may not have all the answers all the time. Instead of pushing it away, doubt is meant to be embraced, as it's often a signal that greatness is around the corner. Marc will get into all this and more coming up next on the Audacious Living Podcast. Marc, it's great to have you on the Audacious Living Podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. This is a distinct pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. You're an author. You've written a book. How's that for you?
Well, it's weird. This is my 8th book, the new book that just came out, and it's as much work each time. I forget each time how much work writing a book is, but what is really cool this time is it's the first book where I've sent it out for people for pre-release endorsements. Yep. And they sent it back to me with comments about, here's my endorsement, and thank you so much for this exercise or this technique. I needed to hear that. So it's already was helping people before, and this is the first one where people are actually posting it in the pictures in the wild, which is great. It's so much fun to see the joy that people are getting from the book. So it's great. It's a real honor.
Well, the timing of messages is you can't beat that, right?
I know, right?
How often is it you pick up something, you read something, you see a tweet or a post, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I need in this moment. So it sounds like that. You experienced a little bit of that.
I didn't experience. Yeah, I did not realize that because I've been a leadership coach since 2003, Franklin Covey certified leadership coach, got my master's in organizational leadership before that. And so I've been working with leaders the whole, a couple decades. So I know the surprising gift of doubt. This explains how I work with with my clients. And it's the first time in 20 years where I've actually been able to do it and people get it. Usually they say, what do you do? Oh, I'm an executive coach. And they'd say, okay. And then they come back and say, so what do you do? So this was the answer to that. And I've been doing it as keynotes before the pandemic, and I was doing some intensives where leaders came into Greenville, South Carolina, where I live. And we're able to work on this for a whole day because most of us don't give ourselves time in our day to work on ourselves. So to get out of our system and just have a day committed to working with other people in a room, it was really helpful. So I knew it worked. And when the pandemic hit, my wife said, all right, this is where we're moving forward on the book. You've got drafts of it. You think you've got a draft that works. Let's work with getting this done. And it wasn't until after it was, so you get consumed in the details. Absolutely. And then it was released and you realize, oh, we have spent a time of global doubt in the last 14 months that is shared. It's not just people groups or sectors or whatever. There is a common sense of doubt. We don't know what the way ahead is. And so I'm surprised at how timely it is.
Well, it's so easy for me to sit in my little bubble, my little world, and think that I'm the only one experiencing it, or not even really recognizing someone else's experience because I'm so deep in my own stuff, right? And where there's great power is kind of people coming together and going, hey, I'm feeling the same way too. Like, hey, me too. And
well, that's one of the power. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Leadership in self-employment or however you are, leadership, I think, is influencing others. So however you're influencing others, it isn't in our cultures necessarily the right place to show doubt, especially with the models we've been given. We've been given models of you have it together, you're a bold leader with confidence, you're crashing forward and decisive and no questions, no second guessing. Right. So that's what we try to replicate. And when we don't feel that, we feel like, wow, there must be something broken with me because I see all these issues. Like when you take over, I had a mentor that said, the view is always different from the captain's chair. When you sit in that CEO seat, the executive director seat, when you're responsible for all the revenue and expenses or overseeing that gets really scary. There's a lot more to see. So, but it's the higher we move up in organizations, the less safe it gets to talk because there's less supervision and you want to show confidence. Because I had a leader in Colorado tell me, Mark, look, vulnerability, I understand they say it's important. The 100 people that report to me don't need to see me saying, I'm really not sure we haven't got this all figured out. Right. Because they want to know they have a job. They need to have some sort of, to be able to do their job, they need to have some level of confidence that we're moving forward. So just like you said, it's amazing. That's why the leadership intensives were so fun. But even when I'm doing a keynote on this or something, to have the person on the stage saying, we all go through doubt. We all experience doubt. And seeing just the atmosphere in the room, you can almost see it change because people are just
relief.
They're I'm not alone. I'm not going to admit it to anyone else, but at least somebody sees me and I'm maybe not crazy. Maybe I'm not alone in this.
Yeah. Well, you gave in your book, you gave an illustration of that leader who wanted to be led or directed or supervised, if you will. Right. And I think, and I thought that was perfect because I really puts you, this is what it's like. And there's nothing wrong with that because of, again, the doubt kind of creeps in and I really, what I think is great about your book is you're giving permission to be okay with having doubt. It's not a bad thing.
Well, yeah. And because I think part of what happens to a lot of us is that the doubt becomes, we focus on, because we think doubt is bad, we focus on it as a weakness and a bad thing that needs to be fixed instead of wondering, what else could this be telling me? And I honestly, it took me years to figure out that could be telling me anything. So, but I think it's what your message is always is about being authentically yourself is where that's the gift. Okay, these things aren't working for me. It could be that I'm broken, which is totally legit. There's a lot of good places to get certifications or therapy or pharmaceuticals. There's all sorts of different ways. We live in a wonderful time where there's a lot of ways to address issues or stuff.
Yes.
But maybe maybe it's that I'm an introvert leader and I'm just modeling extroverts, and that's why I'm so exhausted. And maybe I need to discover a different way of leading my team. Or maybe it's, I'm a facts-based person and everybody around me is all about relationships, and I need to put some sort of quantifiable measure on this so that I know that we're moving forward too, not just having a party every day. Okay, everybody feels great, but are we getting anything done? Right. So yeah, figuring out some of those nuances can be really, really helpful, and making it so you move from, I don't know if you've had this. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a family where we had homework because we were school students, we were in school, and we had homework because we were Pitmans. So I had to read Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Norman Vincent Peale, Power of Positive Thinking, listen to Zig Ziglar and Les Brown, and Are You Hungry? The motivational speakers and all. And the growing up in that, I forgot where I was going because I get so excited about Les Brown. That's so scary. But go ahead.
I was going to tell you a story about growing up. I mean, I grew up in a religious household, so we oftentimes, our homework was biblical-based Bible.
Oh, we were reading every morning, 5 a.m. We read through, we were falling asleep over the genealogies in the Old Testament. Yeah, we were. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so I love that, having that learning, lifelong learning, because I think leaders, that's something that can help us. I keep saying all of us, but I am surprised.
But it is all of us, isn't it? Like, isn't it?
I think so too, but yeah, I've coached a number of leaders who don't read, and I don't understand that. But they're still teachable, which is good. It's the leaders that I feel sad for are the people that stop learning, and they just feel like I'm done learning. That seems so sad.
Yeah, I'm too busy being a leader that I can't learn, and I think the two are hand in hand.
Yeah, there's something, isn't there? Yeah, a lot of us forget. I think some of what happens too is through school, we get taught by report cards, and work, we get taught by performance reviews. So if we're not doing things that are going to show up on the report card, I think we often feel like we're not doing legitimate work. So reading a book to learn how to be a better leader, learn how to cast vision, set goals, work with a team, that can feel like you're cheating because it's not actually in a quantifiable way necessarily producing revenue or producing outcomes. But it's again, I'm a Franklin Covey guy. Stephen Covey's talking about sharpening the saw. It's actually building your capacity to do more, but you have to give yourself permission or be around people that will give you permission to say, yeah, no, you need to take some professional development. You need to learn some more.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You gave an example just a few moments ago about an introverted leader. And I absolutely love that because that's first off, that's something that we connect to leadership as being an introvert. And many will say, well, how can you be a leader if you're inward thinking all the time? But so much even of what your book, it's forcing people to kind of look inwards.
True. I hadn't made that connection. Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the best gifts that we can give our organizations is a space for introvert leaders. Introverts have the ability to think and then speak. Shocking for me as an extrovert. I don't know what I'm thinking until I said it.
Let's speak at the same time, right?
Right. And then I'll figure. So that's what early in our marriage, that was one of our biggest areas of conflict with my wife and I, because we lined up on some of the other areas, but introvert, extrovert, we get to the end of the day, come back to our tiny little cramped duplex that the landlord had taken over part of. So we're in a little tiny part. And we'd be exhausted. And I'd just say, let's just go to a movie or Starbucks. And my wife would look at me like I had 6 heads and was crazy. No, I'm exhausted. I want to just watch TV. And I don't know if this was similar to your family, but my family, you didn't watch TV. You read books, you went to seminars and rallies. TV was seen as a bad thing. And I did not know that TV for an introvert can be a way of putting up a fence around themselves so that they can internally process stuff. But I would also then share a whole bunch of ideas of what we could do. And she'd say, I'd leave feeling great. I made my decision. This is awesome. And she'd be just dizzy with, what did you just do? You just talked all sides of an issue. So knowing some of these things internally, she was able to start asking me, are you verbally processing or have you come to a decision?
No. I get it. I can relate so much to that. And I've actually even forced myself to kind of just slow down a bit. And because I want to be out there. I want to go, hey, look, let's openly discuss and go through that problem solving out in the open. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Not everyone is at that same. Some people want that time to process and think and really be thoughtful and analyze and then come out and say, here's what I think. Nothing wrong with that.
Well, one of the things that I've learned, Suzanne Stabile does a lot of good teaching on the Enneagram. And one of the ways that she codifies this typology, 9-type typology, was with stances, which is a Dr. Karen Horney did this in Germany. Horney, sorry. There are aggressive stances, there are dependent stances, and there are withdrawn stances. And I think that they can all be good leaders. I worked with some withdrawn stance leaders in the pandemic, in the beginning of the pandemic, and the withdrawn tends to close their door, look to the past for their answers for the present and future, and really absorb information, which can be very frustrating to an aggressive who wants to just get stuff done. The future is not, they live in the future, aggressives live in the future. And so as we start understanding, and then dependents confuse both of them, because dependents are always in the present more and looking for answers with other people. So, but if we're working together in teams, we need the people that can look to the back and amass information and be able to process that. They need to be benefited by the aggressives to actually get out of the door and do something. But they also we all need the dependents to be able to help us not unintentionally leave people behind. Because if it were just aggressives, we leave everybody in our dust. And if it were just withdrawns, they wouldn't attract anybody or keep them around. So having the differences and the varieties frees people up to be themselves. I had this experience where I was in one job as a fundraising major gift person. Okay. Loved my job. I love travel. I love people, love connecting people to causes, loved all of it. But I thought I couldn't really, it wasn't really worth a paycheck if I enjoyed it. So I was telling one of the faculty members at the boarding school, we were driving to the mall to get some stuff for a camping trip with the students. And I tried to downplay it. I tried to talk about the hardships of air travel, because they were. I mean, it's not all glory. No. But I did a bad job, oddly. I did a really bad job being really not liking my job, because he looked over me and said, "You really love what you do, don't you?" Yep. And I got this kind of like sheepish grin, like guilty grin of, yeah, I do. And what that showed me was he didn't want to do that at all. He was more reserved, and he liked being in a classroom where he knew the curriculum. He knew how to make the adjustments because he knew what was expected each day. And if it didn't happen, where he had to make it up. He knew his expectations. He knew where he was going to be. And he said he loved that. And that is, I think, as leaders, one of the things we find is, and that people love doing stuff we don't love doing. And we're not cheating by helping them do what they love. No. You really love doing the book work. I don't. Could you would you consider taking that on as part of this? It's not cheating, it's leading.
The pool, right? There's room for everyone. So absolutely.
Yeah.
Marc, can we, I want to go back actually to the title of your book, The Surprising Gift of Doubt. What makes doubt such a surprising gift? It's seen as, like we just talked about earlier, that many view it as a bad thing, not good, holds you back. I would imagine fear, and we'll talk about fear in a little bit. I imagine fear is works in that as well. Explain that to me, Willie, if you don't mind.
Well, the doubt drives us what I've observed over 20 years of executive coaching leaders is that doubt drives us to get fixed, which is not the gift part yet. The first part of getting fixed is usually looking to the external cues. So we know something, we're leading like others lead, but we're not getting the responses others get. So we have to figure out, why are we not getting them? What's wrong with us? Is it goal setting? Is it time management? Is it people skills? Is it, so we go to seminars, we get certifications, we get degrees even, we try to fix what's wrong.
Right.
That is a positive aspect of it. But what usually happens with leaders because leaders are so caring and want to make an impact on the world, is that they don't look at the 80%. When you read a book, like I read Getting Things Done, I didn't fully implement it. And I felt like it would be easy for me, and I probably did at the time, think I'm a failure, because everybody on the book cover said that they implemented the entire system of getting things done, and it changed their life and it transformed their world. And I only took 2 things from the book. I must be really deficient because I missed the other 80%. Right. And people lurch, and that's where so many people's success journeys are, is they lurch from feeling failure to failure. And that's where I lost myself before, was the whole fake it till you make it. There's an aspect of faking it till you make it that is actually healthy in leadership, I think. But there's also another aspect of, in this deep doubt part, it's not healthy, because you've got this long string of successes, and there are people around you that totally have confidence that you'll be able to pull the rabbit out of the hat again, but you have no idea how it's going to be done. And you just feel like you're a fraud and you shouldn't be there. And maybe you should just not even be leading the team, the project, the organization anymore. The gift is that doubt can get amped up enough where it forces you get exhausted with looking at external cues, and you have the invitation to look internally and look at how you're wired, how you're put together, how your organization operates, not excluding all the external stuff. The data, the stats, the stuff, the hard facts is good, but we're told not to go soft, not to look at the internal, not to look at the emotional. And I think the gift of doubt is reframing from, I keep failing, I must be broken, to, what if I'm exactly the type of leader that's needed for this situation? What if I'm exactly the voice that needs to be heard on this cause? What if my organization is exactly the type of organization that our sector needs?
Right.
And when you start thinking from that perspective, you start seeing what makes us different. How are we operating differently? What can we contribute to the conversation? And that is a huge gift. I would submit.
You know, and I see where you're coming from, and I follow that train of thought, because a big part of that, as I see it, is kind of like embracing that uncertainty, the things you don't know about, the things you're uncertain about, because you can't move forward without it. And the other part of that is, after you embrace it, you kind of have to act and implement it on it, right? Like it's no different than, I've got a bookshelf full of books, and I can read them all, and I put them on the shelf to look good, but I don't actually do anything with them. Then what have I really accomplished?
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the gifts of, well, I don't want to say this because I don't want to sound flip. One of the shared experiences of the coming out of the pandemic, as we are having gone through a global pandemic, is that there was at least a period of time, particularly in the beginning of the lockdowns, whenever those happened in the different countries that are listening, where there was a shared experience across all sectors and across all levels of an organization of, we don't know what's coming. We do not know what this looks like. And hopefully people will be able to harken back to that and have that shared experience. It was very scary. I know I was scared working with my clients because we didn't know at first, and we started gaining some traction. And that's where, for me, I'm all about action. And I'm an aggressive, I understand that, but the action starts building some confidence. So as you start acting on certain things and beta testing and just trying things out and seeing what works, you can learn how you adapt, but also how people respond. And you can get data from that, as opposed to just sitting in the void of ambiguity and unknown. Right. Yeah. If you know a lot of data, that's great, but you have to actually act on it to move forward.
Yeah, as opposed to being in this frozen state of, what do I do? And it's interesting, during those periods, and I use the pandemic as a great example, that's a tremendous opportunity to people who even use creativity as an example, right? Like, become more creative, to problem solve, to develop new systems of ways of doing things. So so it's going back to embracing that, because a lot of really good things can come out of it.
Well, and that's where a lot of our organizations are really, there are some sectors, I guess, that are less risk averse, but many of them are risk averse. And there's that saying that I've heard a lot before the pandemic of, nobody ever got fired for doing the same thing as last year. And that really there needs to be some sort of increased tolerance for risk, so that we can try. Medical practices always said they couldn't go online because of HIPAA. If in the United States, it's HIPAA because of privacy laws, whatever. And within days, they had converted to telehealth and all. Right. So we can do things that we don't think we can do. And there are people, friends of mine, whose their entire livelihood was wiped out. And they were able to take figure out, what do I know and how can that address where people are now? And they were able to come out of the pandemic stronger. It was not comfortable. I mean, and that's the thing with risk, is that there's a lot of uncertainty, but if you're doing it for the right reasons, that's why I love values. Helping you find your core values, helping an organization figure out their core values, right, can help know that, like, that's what held some of these organizations together at times of crisis is we do not know what's ahead. That can be an honest statement from a leader.
Sure.
But we do know these things to be true. We are going to take care of all of our staff. We're going to do the best we can. We have a responsibility to keep the organization alive. And whatever we do, we'll try to do that in a way that keeps us all as a team. We do know that we're going to treat everybody with humanity. So if we have to make tough decisions, we're not going to do it in a way that objectifies people or does it without, we're going to take care of you as best as we can in the situation. Whatever those values are, being able to reaffirm that to people that, hey, these are the things these are going to stick around.
These are our whys. Here's why we're doing what we're doing and why it's important that we maintain us doing that. I thought the example you gave of the telehealth was a really good example because all the time we couldn't be online, and within moments, because you had to, it was, and sort of where I want to go with this is really around the doubt that we have. Is it really founded, or what is it founded in? Right? Because you'll see sometimes where decisions aren't made or action isn't being taken because of this doubt, but we don't know if that doubt is even founded in anything real.
Well, isn't that the truth? Yeah, there's that 90% of the things I think it's a quote attributed to Mark Twain, which many of them are. 90% of the things I worried about never came to pass anyway. And that's true. There are certain people that are really good at finding all sorts of risks and reasons why things won't work. And when they start taking action in certain ways, they find out that, you don't know. I guess, I don't know if you heard this in some of the reading you've done or and all, but I've heard that, what was it? Fear knocked at the door, faith answered, no one was there. And Zig Ziglar used to say, and I'm sure other people did too, that fear was false evidence appearing real. It looks like a big deal. An example of this in North America at the time of this recording, the last year or so, was nonprofits and donors. Nonprofits in the beginning of the pandemic felt like businesses are being shuttered. It is not respectful for us to ask right now for money. People are dying and businesses are being shuttered. What we learned quickly, there were some nonprofits that said, you know what, I'm going to treat the donor like an adult and let them decide. I'm not going to try to be parental and say, oh, you can't, I will not allow you to give. And the ones that gave their option to donors doubled and tripled their fundraising. Donors are incredibly generous. But the fear stymied so many. And so many good causes are now out of business because they let fear become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
Instead of saying, yeah, let's let this, we can change our wording saying, this may not be a good time for you. We get that. If you're able to contribute, would you consider? That's fine. Yes. But to just not ask, it's like driving across country and not putting gas in your tank. You're not going to get far.
Not at all.
You're not going to make it.
And again, fear does that. It cripples you, it freezes you, it holds you back. And again, to the acronym about, things appearing real when they really just aren't, right?
Yeah. And that's where I think the healthy fake it till you make it is where there are times, and I've seen in my own work where when you have 4 or 5 paying clients calling you to do something that you don't list on your website, I have learned over the years that maybe they see something in me that I don't see in myself. And that's where I'll be honest. I won't lie to them at all. Honesty and integrity are our best leadership tools, but I will move forward. I say, look, this isn't something I offer, but if you see this, we can move forward. And I still feel like I'm faking it, but I learned, oh, wow, there's a whole nother tool set that I didn't even realize, or there's a different way to do what I offer that, can be also addressed to this problem. Yeah. So that's where the pushing through fear. Yeah. You may be faking it because the fear is so present. But there's another saying that said, without fear, courage wouldn't be courage. You have to have courage to get through fear. So it's not feeling the fear that's the weakness. It's being stopped by it. It can be.
Going back to that, embracing the uncertainty. You don't know, but just jump in the pool anyways, right?
Yeah. Right. And so part of that is the stories we tell ourselves too. I'm big on the stories in our self-talk, and part of when whether it's sales or, you're calling up a prospect or just whatever it is, you're calling someone and you could think, boy, this could be the worst time. I could be interrupting them. This may be the most annoying call. I'm maybe being really pushy. those are all possibilities, but they're just as untrue as the saying, maybe this is the best time. Maybe they just came into a ton of cash and they're looking to buy from me. Maybe they've been looking for a volunteer opportunity like this. Maybe I'm going to make their day. And so I figure I might as well lie to myself on the positive side, because my energy goes up and I'll have a better, it'll be a less painful experience for the other person on the call, because at least I'll be happy.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. I want to talk about listening to the nudge, and I'll tell you, when I came across that in your book, my ears kind of perked up a bit, and it got my attention, and largely due to the fact that I very much connected to what we talk about on this podcast, right? In terms of taking that risk, taking that chance, taking that step. But oftentimes it starts with that nudge, right? It oftentimes starts with that little push, because if you can get past that thing in front of you, right? I always talk about on the other side of greatness. On the other side of obstacles is where our greatness lies. But to get there, we need that nudge.
Yeah, that was something, and I don't talk about this in the book, but you brought up faith earlier. One faith tradition I was in, we actually would test the inner voice. Like when we had a suggestion, we learned a lot of humility, and we never said, I am told to tell you this. None of that. We came in with a lot of humility, but I'm sensing this. Does that make sense? And being permission to fail, permission to be wrong. What was amazing is when you walk up to someone and say, I'm kind of may I ask you something, or may I share something with you? Sure. I'm sensing this about you. Does that resonate? Is that accurate? And 9 times out of 10, it would be right on. And so then you start extrapolating that with your life. Like, I'm sensing that, and people just filled in the blank. I've been working in this direction. I'm sensing that if I did this thing over here, it'd be right, but there's nothing to verify that at all. I can't find the studies to say that we need to be doing this, but I think there's something here. And just giving yourself permission to test it. Like we were talking about earlier, taking some action. And I think this is where it sounds like in the way that you teach Audacious too, it's similar to, it's being authentic to yourself, not being a blaggart or not being, this isn't the time for the confetti and balloons and t-shirts that everybody wears with the new slogan, but this is just most of the things I try, I call them beta testing, because, or a practice, not a policy, because I just want, but it takes a lot to become a practice. It's usually a beta test or something we're just testing out, because it's a lot easier to stop it. There's a lot less ego involved when, I tested this podcast and it was a good run, but we're going to move in a different position. I interviewed a leader, Suzanne Nance, out of Portland, Oregon. Okay. She leads one of the public radio stations there. And she talked about how her staff came to her with a project she knew was not sustainable and was doomed to fail, but it was the right thing for them to do, and for them to go on that journey together as a staff of realizing why it wasn't sustainable. And she had the maturity to understand this. I guess partly is it's not going to reflect, whether it reflects on me good or bad. This is something the staff, it's strongly approved by the staff, and it will benefit listeners for a period of time. And it was in bringing senior citizens to live music concerts before the pandemic. And there are all sorts of great stories that they've got out of this as a team. And they did shutter the project, but they can celebrate, hey, we listened to that. Yeah, we tried that out. This was a good thing. And we've, it wasn't sustainable, but wow. What I love, I guess what I'm saying about that is I love leaders that are able to build risk for the right reasons into their experience, so that they can harken back to that and it becomes a little less scary. That
says a lot about her, knowing that the road we're going down is a dead end and to still go anyways.
Yeah. And knowing that she's not the boss, because it's a nonprofit. So the board is the boss. Yep. And so the board is going to reflect on her. You did this project. Why did you expend our time, effort, and resources this way? I agree. There was one leader I know, and I won't say it on the show because it was pretty weird, but it was basically a stupidity award. He had a statue that modeled stupidity, and it was their VP of human resources. And they shared every staff meeting, and they put it under their desk. But what they would do is being made a fool for trying to do the right thing. and it was for serving the staff. It's human resources. Like, I tried to be so staff serving that I got totally taken for a ride. This person manipulated me, or this happened, and it was the VP all the way down in the division. And so they vied for it. But what he found was that people would come up to him midweek. Hey, I think I just earned the trophy. And they were able to stem problems a lot quicker, as opposed to people covering them up, trying not to expose them, trying to look good. It gave some humanity to the whole process of, we're not going to get it right all the time.
Right. It's big. I like that. I like that a lot. The significance of leaders sort of recognizing their strengths and their gifts, and I think that's another big one. I wonder if you could touch on, Mark, because that to me, when you sort of look at the whole, the whole picture, if you will, that stands out as a real big one. In addition to sort of recognizing the issue up front, right? But how you resolve that, like, that's a really big one.
Like the different hardwirings, or
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So the way I'd love to hear what assessments you use when it comes to hardwiring. Like, what have you found helpful?
Well, when you talk about behaviors as an example, as you really analyze it, because I like this whole idea of analyzing those behaviors and learning from what lessons do you learn from that about who you are, the people around you, how you interact with them, and what you. So I think those are sort of the things that come to mind immediately.
Yeah. So I love assessments, as long as they're not used to confine people and not to protect and not to limit others by saying you can't possibly do this because the assessment said you're that, or yourself, I can't possibly do this. So one of my examples is, I'm a very active, people-centered person, but I had to learn to do my budget, even though it was not a strong point for me. My wife also told me I had to learn to do my budget. So she left the house for the first 18 months of her turning the books over to me for a while. And because it was just so stormy and not good. But there are certain things that we're called on to do. But it was good for me to know that it wasn't necessarily my skill set. So the way I've found through coaching leaders is, there's the behavior-based hardwiring, like DISC assessment that's the one I use. Introvert, extrovert, task-centered, people-centered. But then there's also cognitive ability or muscle ability. There's just certain things you do. Ability hardwiring is sort of what can you do quickly? And you can develop skills to help you do things differently. But there's the Highlands ability battery that does 19 different tasks under time pressure that you could probably do if you're given enough time, but it shows what comes quickly to you. And that's really helpful because you can't skew those results. Those aren't like, would you rather go to a movie or read a book? I don't know. Depends on the movie. It depends on the book. Then there's also the motivation hardwiring, which I find is really helpful, which I use the Enneagram for, because it tells not just what your behavior is, but what story are you living out of that causes you to see that behavior as the way to be successful in the world. All of those things, I think, do two things. One, it helps you as a leader realize, oh, not everybody sees the world like me.
That's right.
So you can start identifying yourself of, okay, I'm getting really stressed right now. Why? And, in a staff meeting that's all process driven and you want to get stuff accomplished, it could be, oh, it's because this is another process thing. They're going to start another investigative committee, or they're going to start another study session, and I just want an outcome. And then you can just live in that space that Roland May talks about between stimulus and response. And you get to be able to say, what's the appropriate response? Should I push for accomplishment, or should I allow for a little bit more study? But you also learn how to work with others and speak their dialect too. So you learn, if you're talking to someone like me, it may be appropriate to speak a little faster, but if I'm talking to someone that's more reserved, I should take clues to just be hospitable, to speak the dialect of the person and to be hospitable of holding back, or honoring the fact that somebody that's more reserved may be, when they share an idea, they're not verbally processing. They're not necessarily looking for me to bat it around and all. I need to treat that idea with a little bit of respect that I wouldn't necessarily feel for an idea I share, because I'm just kind of spitballing where they've already done the internal processing. So I think it develops a lot of grace and compassion in leaders, and productivity. You stop putting up sabotaging activities and behaviors and actions that cause your team to stumble, and you can help move them into positions that are more suited for them.
Yeah. Mark, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been so much fun, and I had a lot of fun just dissecting, and we even talked about your book too. Imagine that, eh? As well.
Thank you so much.
I do want to ask you one last question around integrity, which is interestingly enough, that was the last chapter in your book. I think it was honoring your integrity, and I think that's a sort of nice bow in all this, because I think there's some, when we talk about integrity, certainly on how we behave, but we owe it to ourselves as well to a certain degree to behave with integrity and how we act, and even the manner we think and to take action, things of that nature. I wonder if you sort of touch on that significance in the leadership framework.
So for the way I talk about integrity is that when you have your hardwiring and your stories that you tell yourself and your goal setting and your mission, vision, values working together, they're integrated. And so that's the integrity comes from the integration. And there's a sense of, even though this is a lifelong journey. So it's not like you're going to arrive at, oh, I now get it. It's a process of discovery, and people keep changing, systems keep changing, culture keeps changing. But there's a solidity that comes from knowing where your center is and knowing where you're going to flex and where you're not going to flex, where lines you're not going to cross. And that kind of integrity gives you this real focus as you're leading, where you realize you have an ability to respond to things without just having to react knee jerk to things. And that's why I call it the integrity model. And I love that kind of that almost indescribable feeling of confidence that comes from working as well. As I think I say in the book, it's instead of taking other people's leadership suits and trying to fit into their clothing, you get the custom made suit that's perfectly for you and perfectly for your organization.
Absolutely, and that's so key. If we all do that, just imagine how fantastic of a place this would be if we're all doing that.
It's kind of audacious, isn't it? Because we're not taught. We're taught to be similar or to conform, and what this is doing is helping people be their audacious selves, be authentic. Yeah, the world. Can you imagine? Well, of course you can, because this is your podcast. How much better the world would be if we were all freed up.
That's right. To
be ourselves, not to be loose cannons, not to be, toxic people, but freed up to be ourselves. Oh my goodness. That's my dream too. That's my goal.
You don't got to sell me. I'm right there with you, Mark. If you could let our listeners know where they can find out more about you, specifically pick up a copy of their own copy of The Surprising Gift of Doubt.
It's at Indigo, Amazon, anywhere fine books are sold. Bookshop.org and Indigo. I think it's Indiegogo allows for independent bookstores to be benefited too. ConcordLeadershipGroup.com is where I've got a lot of my stuff. And if people wanted to do the values inventory, it's at Concord with a D, ConcordLeadershipGroup.com/values, and they can get a free values inventory there.
Awesome. Hey, Mark, I appreciate this. A lot of fun. Thanks for sharing the insights, and congrats on the book.
Thank you.
All right. All the best. Take care.
Bye now.
Back we are here on the podcast, and I first off want to send my thanks and appreciation for Mark for stopping by and leaving us with those insights. So again, thank you so much. I think it was great just to have that dialogue, and I think your insights will help adjust our perspective as it relates to the topic of doubt and self-doubt. We know that it's a real thing. It's going to come up. The real question is, what are you going to do when it arrives, and how do we handle it? How do we interpret it? How do we analyze it? Those are all great things that we should be doing when we run into doubt, and it will come. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, I'd encourage you to do so by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com. All you've got to do is enter your email address, and you'll be alerted every time there's any kind of new content that comes out or any kind of updates or news or whatever. You are immediately in the know and in the loop. I want to take this opportunity, as I always do, to thank our listeners for the tremendous ongoing support. It really means so much to us here on the podcast. And again, we just appreciate you. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.